and it's time for us to focus on State of the Nation, where we put our pulse on the state of the nation and see whether our heartbeat is healthy or not. Joining me this morning to have that discussion, I'll start with introducing the panel. To my extreme left, we have Irungo Kang'ata, who is the Member of Parliament for Kiharu. Good to have you and welcome.
Thank you.
Next to him, we have Javas Bigambo, who is a governance expert and consultant.
Thank you so much.
Karibu sana. Last but not least, we have Honorable Peter Kaluma, Member of Parliament, Homa Bay Town.
Thank you.
Karibu.
Thank you.
All right, so one of the things, of course, that has been on the news lately is to do with, even on the headlines today, we have locked MPs get a taste of grim life in filthy cells. And this, of course, is because of certain statements that they were alleged to have made that would polarize the country. Let me start with you, Javas, in terms of whether our leaders are being responsible with some of the things they say.
Well, one thing I think I must appreciate, that we are living in a time of violations. What has been demonstrated in the past few weeks or months, and which has translated to what I may term as the recent dramatic arrests of legislators, demonstrates that to a great extent we could be having a team of leaders and even individuals who are hell-bent on demonstrating their affront to the values that we hold dear as a nation. And if you look at, for example, our constitution that we endear so much, Article 10 sub Article 2 speaks to those values, and key among them, for example, is it to flag out is national unity. And one may want to ask, for instance, the manner in which the legislators and various individuals who are locked up today have made various remarks. Is it in a manner that promotes the values that this nation cherishes, that the Constitution captures? And far more than that, we want to look at it in a very expanded way. If we have to appreciate that this new Constitution is supposed to trigger and lead us into an egalitarian society, and a society that appreciates social justice and equality and equity, to what extent are we having leaders who promote that kind of drive? And it is easy to say that the manner in which leaders have, these leaders have conducted themselves negates such kind of drive.
Okay, let me come to you, Honorable Irungo Kang'ata, and get your comments regarding what is happening, especially in regards to hate speech.
Yes, personally, I think it is wrong to perpetuate or even to utter hate speech. We need to punish any person who is doing that, notwithstanding which party that person's come from. And therefore, I think what has happened is very commendable. However, if you know the art of politics, you will somehow understand why they did that.
Are you saying that then it's justified for them to say that?
No, it is not justified. It is not justified, but I can tell you, if you know the art of politics, you will see.
So help us understand, what is that art of politics that gets us here? Because as a Kenyan,
yes, I can tell you.
As a Kenyan, all we see is violence.
No, it is
and
wrong.
At the end of the day, none of us wants to go back to where we were in 2007, 2008.
When you look at politics, you have to look at politics in two dimensions. Are you looking at politics as it is or as it ought to be? When you look at politics as it ought to be, it is wrong, it is morally wrong. But when you look at politics as it is, I can tell you these guys are heroes. Me and Kaluma here, we have no...
What do you mean by that?
You see, personally I attended the Kasarani event, and I can tell you, when we were being introduced, those guys would say, here comes Mheshimiwa Irungo from Kiharu. The people will just look at me, yeah, he's a fake guy. But when Kuria is mentioned, you hear people shouting. People are so happy. That then tells you, at times in politics, you have to do bad things for your political career to go up. It's the reality of politics. It is not good. It is not good at all, but it is the reality of politics.
So in short,
I can tell you, for instance, this guy called Waititu, he is 90% certain of ousting Bwana Kafogo because of his antics. That's the reality of politics. It's not desirable, but that is the truth.
Wow. Some serious allegations.
No.
Honorable Peter Kaluma, do you agree? You're an MP, you're in politics.
Excuse me one point, and maybe he can confirm to you. If there is one women rep who is going to be re-elected again for certain, is Wanga. Why? The day she drew some water on the speaker during the fracas, she became a hero in Luo Nyanza. And I can tell you, for instance, for CORD protests, for instance, for them to be effective, I can tell you, if the demonstrations they do were to follow as per the constitution, they would have no effect. But they become effective. And I can tell you, at times, I suspect it's CORD guy who inside those guys. When there is chaos, there is a lot of melodrama. So therefore, we need probably to change the framing of our politics for us to move forward.
Okay, you're a leader and you'll tell us how we should change that, because really you're the ones who are supposed to steer that change. But let me come to Honorable Peter Kaluma and tell me, is what he's saying true?
You know, Mike, I don't want to make this matter small. It's so serious a matter to talk politics about. The people of Kenya want anything that can divide our people dealt with. And the people of Kenya want to be united as a people and as a true nation. Unfortunately, Mike, since independence, we've never been a nation. In fact, there is no nation called Kenya. We have a country called Kenya with over 42 sub-nations. So there is the Luo nation, the Kikuyu nation, the Kalenjin nation, all of them together. And I think if you look at our Constitution 2010, what we were doing is to see how we can, move from these sub-national, enclaves to a true nation. So our people want something that can divide people, like hate speech dealt with. But our people do also not want, or do not also want, the law on hate speech abused to harass people who are otherwise innocent. Mike, let me put this matter into context. This gentleman called Moses Kuria speaks from somewhere. And by the way, people are saying he engaged in hate speech. But to me, he didn't. Because Moses Kuria is saying he knows there is a plot to assassinate the former prime minister and to blame it on him. What we should be demanding of Moses Kuria is to tell us who is plotting to kill the prime minister, when, how, and why. Not to say he engaged in hate speech. Kimani Wagunjiri rises in Nakuru and says members of the Luo community ought to leave Nakuru for Kisumu. And the Prime Minister is lucky to have been in Nakuru before he arrived. You see, these are real cases of utterances that can divide people, conduct that can divide people. Now, look at then what happens. The police sit back, NCIC sit back, until, of course, the media comes up saying, we are demanding action on such thing. Until the opposition leadership calls a press conference to say, the IG, you must act, or we will storm your offices to demand action. I mean, what is wrong in, storming a lethargic public office demanding action by a citizenry if it is deserved? Look at what then happens. I mean, see the drama by which opposition members, including members who are never at that press conference, are being hauled in. And then look at the charges being cited. Let me tell you, Kangata may not know, because I was one of the lawyers in the process. Aisha Katana, you made inciting utterances by saying, rahisi kuchagua mtu kama Moses Kuria kwa msungumuzo ya IEBC ni mchezo. How can that be hate speech? It's a bad joke. Somebody like Senator Mudhama, and I can say, if you want to charge Mudhama, there are so many things you can investigate to charge him if you want. But Mudhama was not even at Capitol Hill. But beyond that, you're saying Mudhama and others merely said we will storm the IG's office to demand action on this. So there is a way in which, in the process of enforcing law, you can engender more hate than dealing with hate. And I can tell you as opposition leaders, we are feeling very bad about it. Mike, let me tell you.
What exactly are you feeling bad about? I
mean, you go charging people, keeping them, denying them their liberty without cause at all, like the instances I've told you.
So you're saying they're all innocent?
The opposition leaders are innocent.
But the Jubilee leaders are not?
Of course, you know what they said. They're certainly not. But not on hate speech. I've said somebody like Moses Kuria, and people think that, the ICC president, I don't know where we brought it from, that you bring people on this side, you bring people on this side, even if they are innocent. I mean...
So from your opinion, what you're saying as a lawyer, you're saying that the opposition leaders are all innocent, but those in Jubilee are guilty.
That they are being harassed. because they're in opposition leadership, and it is something we are
Harassed unfairly.
very bit about. We are very bit about
Harassed
it.
unfairly.
Very unfairly.
Okay.
Very
Jabez,
unfairly.
your comments on that. Do you feel that what Honorable Kaluma here says is true? That it's actually the opposition leaders who are being targeted unfairly, whereas the Jubilee are guilty and possibly they're going through that out of their own making?
Well, if you examine the charge sheets,
It's annoying.
then you may find yourself concluding that possibly the charges are frivolous. And actually,
On all of them or just some?
no, if you look at a number of them and how they're stated, and then also if you look at the manner in which it's been first or captured rather, that this is the reason for which you are being indicted, or rather the reason for which you're being incriminated, then any sound magistrate or judge may easily, without even second thought, throw those cases out, because it cannot sustain a charge. Because some of those things that have been cited in those charge sheets do not have the weight and do not bring out that picture that is the crime itself. Now let's look, for example, at Article 33 of the Constitution. Sub-Article 1 easily gives, and clearly so, the issue of the freedom of speech to every citizen of this country. If you look at Article 33, Sub-Article 2, itself now criminalizes, or rather, the prohibitions and responsibilities on matters of hate speech. Now, to what extent then would somebody would want to examine both sides, whether it's the Jubilee legislators or the CORD legislators, to what extent were their utterances injurious? To what extent were they aimed at dividing a people or instigating violence? Those are things to examine. And far much more than that, I think what we have come to at this moment is also to point a finger at the National Commission Integration Commission. For instance, why do they have to wait until there is public outcry and the media also to speak so eloquently that the NCAC now voices some of these things? Far much more than that. Is the NCAC merely a signpost, a signpost indicating that you need not incite citizens or etc.? Actually, we need to carry out now an audit and ask ourselves, to what extent is the NCAC useful in terms of curtailing hate speech in this country?
And I guess all we'll need to do really is just look at their scorecard and see what they have done so far. And that, of course, I'll just mention at this point, we had actually invited the NCIC Chair Ole Kaparo or any commissioner who was available, but they're out of town and were not able to come for this interview because it would have been good to get from them what they feel has been their progress so far. And I'll come back to you, Jabez, in terms of whether the NCIC in its current constitution and the way it is made was made to fail right from the beginning. But I'll come to that. Let me hear from Honorable Irungu Kangata regarding what Peter Kaluma has said, especially in relation to the fact that he says this is literally just a sideshow, and the CORD coalition leaders have been arrested unfairly and are not supposed to be in the prison cells as we speak.
Well, to me, it is not true that they have been arrested unfairly. The fact is, when they talk about storming, storming has a lot of connotation. It connotes violence, it connotes chaos. So therefore, when they say they have a grievance against a certain state of sun, they should not talk about storming. They should be talking about demonstrating peacefully. So therefore, to me, those utterances can warrant a conviction if proved in a court of law. Be that as it may, I think the bottom line is the one which I was trying to argue, that we need to remedy our politics. Because I can tell you, if you're a politician, to show up your fortunes politically, you tend to become the most vocal defender of your tribal king. By doing that, you show up your political fortunes. And therefore, my opinion, if you are to look, let's say, like a person like Mudhama, Mudhama is the kingpin in Ukambani. He appears to be the power behind Kalonzo. The same also applies to those other leaders. In their regions, the more they attack Jubilee, the more probably they fight against Jubilee, the more stronger they become. The same also applies to our side. I know of these politicians who are being charged. Those guys, I can tell you in my community, they are heroes. Of course, some of us have issues with the way they conduct their politics, but I can tell you those who have issues with them, they're the minority. And when you talk about the proposal probably to use the laws that we have, to use the constitution, I think we shall be missing the point, because the point is not about legal convictions, it is how our politics is framed. And by the way, the problem appears not to be Kenyan. It appears to be like an international issue. Why do I say so? Look at a person like Trump. How did Trump win the nomination? By spewing hatred against Muslims, against minorities, and by doing that, he appears to have endeared himself among the white males in America. The same also has happened in Philippines the other day. The guy who is now the president is called Duterte. How did Duterte win the presidential race? He told people, once you elect me, I'm going to shoot all criminals. I'm not going to take any person to the prison. And in fact, he said, I'm going to kill so many criminals. Their bodies are going to be dumped in which river? The birds, the vultures are going to become fat. By saying that, people voted him with a very huge percentage.
All right, Javas, maybe just your comments on what Irungu Kang'ata is saying as to whether there is any truth in that. And as humanity, and maybe as Kenyans, if we bring it and contextualize it to our situation here at home, do we have that tendency to want things done in a certain way, but really we are different? Because from what Honorable Kang'ata is saying, if there's any truth in it, what it means is that our leaders are purely dancing to the tune of Kenyans.
Well, mine would be possibly a departure from that, especially with the last question. However, on the first remark by Mheshimiwa that this is not uniquely a Kenyan issue, it is true that the question of hate speech or fighting words, as it's put, is an international problem, and it's not new, it's not reasoned. But we could point our finger to some of the successful prosecutions that have taken place. For example, the case of Chaplinsky versus New Hampshire, and very many other case law that we can cite in Commonwealth situations. And we realize that the struggle against fighting words or hate speech is also a struggle for cohesion. Because once we fight such words, we're trying to see how we could be cohesive as a people and as a society. However, I think when we look at the practice in Kenya and also institutions that are supposed to be helpful, one, I think we need to have a people rising to the Commission on Administrative Justice. And because the Ombudsman is supposed to hear all this, the people need also to rise in sufficient numbers and demonstrate their antipathy to the manner in which possibly leaders are making certain utterances. Much more than that, for example, the NCAC, etc. But it would be crucial not just to see this kind of historic theatrics taking place and the dramatic manner of arrests, etc., and their reigning in court. I think what would be sufficient, what would be, I think, proper, is to see successful convictions. And I would even charge even our legislators here today that it would be a vital lesson if at all from this kind of examples today would see on the strength of the charges against them and the manner in which they have conducted themselves publicly, which of course is contrary even to what is expected to be of Chapter 6 of the Constitution, that even some leaders are barred from running for public office or being determined as unfit to hold public office. Because really, I think if we have to look back in retrospect and appreciate the history of this country, most recent history of 2007, 2008, then none of us would be showering praises and accolades to such kind of remarks, because you realize, and it's not strange, that the most volatile of times in this country are election hearing periods. And we are in such time. And believe you me, while it would be beneficial, building up political capital for some politicians when they make such utterances, fact is that, one, the economy is hurting. Two, we are becoming scaremongers in our politics. And three, I think we must also come to a conclusion that there is nothing so heroic about dividing our people, dividing communities, and actually falling short of helping our people to pursue happiness on the strength of their unity.
Okay. Let me come to you, Honorable Kaluma. And as much as you say that the CORD coalition leaders have been victimized and arrested unlawfully, and possibly what they have said does not warrant for them to be in cells right now for hate speech, are you saying then that what they have said so far you are in agreement with, even those who have possibly made statements that are potentially polarizing, especially given the time that we're in as we approach the elections?
I was speaking to the current instance, and I can tell you, if I were with them, I would have said the same thing.
So you're in agreement?
Because, Mike, I'm in agreement totally, and I think when I leave studio, I will go to a press con and repeat it. Mike, we have the history of assassinations in this country. And if you've looked at, high-profile political assassinations, they start with rumors and casual talk. Rumors and casual talk. That's the way Mboya died, the way Uko died, the way Yusombai died, the way Gamapinto. You get some rumors. When a person, not just a mere person, but a leader comes up and says, there is a plot to assassinate a serious leader like the Prime Minister and blame it on me, it becomes annoying when you hear that leader is being cited for hate speech. It is not hate speech. This is a leader you should embrace, call aside and ask the questions about, this plot so that the nation can do. And then, it gets worrying when you see the security apparatus and the security arrangement around the PM, himself. People struggling to have security, and you see the problems we are talking about. But, let us put that aside. Let us speak to the law. If you look, Mike, at the architecture for our constitution, there are two offices around which we put the matter of uniting the country. One is the president, and he's told you shall be the symbol of national unity. In fact, the only time, that language is used in the constitution, because he's the topmost national leader, embracing all these sub-nations I'm talking about. Then, Mike, we have the National Cohesion and Integration Commission. Mike, let me start by saying that you cannot have a nation where people do not equally own and equally share in their resources. So what you are dealing with in terms of utterances are merely, symptomatic of something below here. Let me apologize to the people of Kenya, I think together with my brother Kangata, because we are the ones who put Kaparo and the current commissioners into NCIC. And if you look at their mandate in law, it is about how we will ensure resources are equitably distributed among the people of Kenya. How public offices will be shared among the people of Kenya. They have forgotten about that they are dealing with utterances, and they have joined the political fray. They are judicializing politics, taking symptoms called, hateful utterances to quote there. How are those resources being dealt with? Mike, what would make a person from Homa Bay County believe Uhuru is his president when he can take all this time without stepping into our county? You get what I mean? There are very simple things we can do to make our country a united country. What do you say about the country in terms of our public service, jobs are being shared out? You have a whole county like Homa Bay, you don't have a mere PS, a mere MD, now many parastatals in the country. Okay. And you go out of the country more so to foreign missions. Kangata will tell you. You go to foreign missions where you think a whole home has been transferred. Just a single home has been transferred outside there. We must, go beyond symptoms and, deconstruct our country, deal with the matters that can unite us, and throw out matters that can,
Let me come to you, Jarvis, and this is in regards to the NCIC and their mandate, and it seems to have been reduced to hate speech or just dealing with utterances that would potentially divide the country. Was that the initial mandate of the NCIC?
Judging by the manner in which they are executing their mandate, you would appreciate that it is a reductionist appreciation of their work. While it is a statutory body, it is supposed to live up to the objectives of Article 249 of the Constitution, of all these constitutional commissions, all these commissions for which the exchequer finances for the operations are supposed to live up to those objects, to make sure that the constitution is not only upheld but respected, to make sure that that which was embraced, that which is sufficient to foster, for example, the issue of equality and social justice, and the communal nature of existence, the issue of equity, etc., is part of that which must be expanded in terms of mandate and operation of the NCAC. Today, however, it is a sad state of affairs to look at it, the manner in which the commission is conducting its work. One, they have perfected the art of doing surveys and releasing reports about which they never follow up in terms of implementation with various agencies. Secondly, they are sitting on the laurels, perfectly sitting on their hands, waiting for various utterances, and so slow to act. In fact, to be very mild about my criticism of NCAC, I would call them a lame duck, but they are far much worse, because people expect much more of that institution. Remember, when it is the taxpayers who sustain you, when you are commissioners and an institution in a public sphere or platform, that the people expect so much of you, and you fall short of the expectations of the people, then I think the honorable thing to do is not to try to defend your jobs. The honorable thing to do is to actually hang up your boots and say that we have had the opportunity, but I think this calling was too high for us. That's what they need to have done.
Okay. Irungu Kangata, in regards to the NCIC, you're a member of parliament, and like Honorable Kaluma has said, maybe you owe the country an apology for the fact that maybe the people who are there are not qualified to do a good job given the results that we have.
No, personally I cannot blame Mr. Kaparo, because the work of Mr. Kaparo is just to investigate and make recommendations, which by the way he has been doing that. He has been investigating, calling people to his office, and when he tries reconciliation and warnings, he takes people
but
to
But
court.
it seems like a knee-jerk reaction because of media coming out to now say that, you know, there's too much wanton hate speech that's going on. Suddenly we see them coming out and making statements. Where were they all this time?
Well, number one, to me the question as to what time you should intervene is neither here or there. The issue is, do you take people to court? Which, by the way, if you are to ask him, he'll show you a very huge list of people he has arraigned to court. And the problem in to a certain extent, I think the judiciary probably has not been doing a good job in respect to these issues. They have been somehow lethargic. They have but it appears for the last 1 week or two, they have been very strong when it comes to the issue of ensuring politicians should be held accountable to that issue. If judiciary was to adopt this approach, probably that can help. However, I still insist, taking people before Kaparo and probably even arraigning that person in court, it is a badge of honor. These guys are going to get out of this place as heroes. And therefore, whether you summon a person, whether you take that person to court without addressing the fundamental issue of ethnicity in politics, there is nothing. These guys are going to emerge there as heroes. And by the way, to a certain extent, I blame you people in the media, because I can tell you, there are so many members of parliament who are doing a good job. But when you when those members of parliament take their issues before the media, they are given a cold shoulder, because good news appear not to have any value, I think, amongst the media. But if you are a politician and you say something that is fighty or something, the media gets traction on that issue. You are splashed in the headline. And for a politician, it is said, any publicity, whether positive or negative, is good publicity.
Okay,
Mike,
Honorable,
Mike, you know, there is a lot of blame on the judiciary. When we fail to fight corruption, it is the judiciary. When we fail to do things that can unite us, it is the judiciary. I mean, we must all remember the system under which the judiciary works and the functioning of the judiciary. The judiciary is not there to convict anybody if there is evidence. If there is no evidence, let me say so, you will be taken there. The judiciary will hold the scales equally between the accused and the prosecution. So if you take Kuria to court with the offense like what I'm telling you, I mean, what option has the judiciary than to release him? If you take those court MPs to the judiciary with those nonsensical cases we are now seeing, I mean, what option has the judiciary? What evidence would you adduce to prove that Aisha Katana engaged in hate speech? So we must start from, what are the cases we are taking to court? Remember, Josephine Kavura was telling you there was an agreement to charge her with phony cases. And you see them. You see them in Anglo-Leasing and others. Let us not blame the judiciary. Let us blame, the systems and institutions we have created to lead the cases to court. And Mike, there is something that Javas has said, which I need to clarify on NCIC. Of all these commissions, we established under statute or under the Constitution. The only commission we gave the broadest power, in fact, there is a provision for NCIC saying to do everything incidental and necessary for the due discharge of their functions. It is one commission that we've given the fullest latitude, to ensure that the people of Kenya are united and we have a true Kenyan nation. Now, if they sit back and reduce, the purview of their functions to this thing they now call hate speech, it is their problem. I'm telling you, the issue of hate, the issues that divide us, are issues about resources and how the people of Kenya have their mouths in the trough, full stop. So let us not blame the judiciary. Let us also not say that we should blame the media for reporting to the country something that can divide the nation. Let the good MPs, and I can tell you, Honorable Kangata is one of them. We have brought so many bills in Parliament, him and I. They have been reported very positively. Yeah. So let us not pass blames. Let us say that really we have a chapter 6 talking about, integrity and ethics on matters leadership. And let leaders be held to it. What we should avoid, Mike, is judicialization of politics. There is the thinking that when you take a leader, most an elected leader to court, it is juicier. So you end up with the leaders being taken to court on the most frivolous.
Javas, when you listen to the two members of parliament speaking, then it seems this hate speech that we're talking about here, that we're bedeviled with, is just, I would call it what? That's just a symptom. It's not the root. It's something, there's something deeper. What do you think bedevils this country that brings us to this point whereby now, like Honorable Kaluma is saying, the NCIC really is meant to bring integration and cohesion of the country, which even if we were cohesive as a country, even if one leader stood up and made some remarks, it would not affect us to a point where we get to 2007, 2008 post-election. The reason why we would get there is because we're already polarized. There are other things possibly that would make us think, yes, we agree with him.
Well, I think it is a question of not focusing so much on the missing links, and also a failure to connect the dots by the people and the various institutions. My deep understanding of the modern capitalistic society that Kenya is supposed to have been jacked by the Constitution of Kenya 2010 to foster social transformation. And when you see the issues that are taking place today, when you look at the state of inequality today that actually even initially the Constitution was supposed to address, and you look at it through the prism of the very progressive and liberal Bill of Rights in our Constitution. And then when you see that various leaders, various cadres of leaders are failing to see how to harness the various talents and the people and resources to make sure that some of the gaps that have been existing are filled. And look at it this way. The manner in which communities are jostling for power, and the manner in which ethnic extraction seems to be very useful in the cog of our politics. And also the manner in which the people themselves, thanks to illiteracy and ignorance, are celebrating leaders who are not looking at the issue of creating opportunities and transformation, social transformation and progress. Then you get to note that however progressive we may have pieces of legislation, however celebrated the Constitution of Kenya 2010 is, which will be even noted and appreciated across the border. If you look at, for example, even at our history, the district focus strategy that Kenya had in the 1970s was picked up by the various Asian nations, and they used it for their progress. We had it, but we did not move forward with it. So we may have very good instruments for progress, but unless we as a people and even leaders come to a point where we see these instruments as those tools that we are supposed to engage each day to move forward, then it will serve for nothing.
Okay. Honorable Irungu Kangata, you've repeated severally that these leaders may come out as heroes and heroines because of the utterances that they have made. So what is our problem?
Our problem is politics of negative tribalism, and which can only be addressed probably using various legal and non-legal measures. So therefore, it has nothing to do with our laws that we have, strictly the penal code regarding hate speech. So therefore, and to me, the problem is deeper. Politics of negative tribalism. And how do you remedy that? One, it appears the people who are drafting the Constitution, they were not wise enough to look as to how you can use the Constitution to address the issue of tribalism in Kenya. Because if I were them, one of the issues probably I would have relooked at is the issue whether is it desirable to have a leader of the opposition who is not inside state offices. I think it is dangerous because I strongly believe Mr. Raila Odinga, this idea of protest and whatever, is a political gimmick for him to remain relevant. And because if he fails to do so,
I mean, what?
Of course, you need to be in
Mike, Mike, you know this is hate speech.
Yeah, no. It is not. It is not. No,
this is hate speech. What relevance? No.
Of course, you want to be the headline.
I'll give you a chance. Let him finish. I want to hear why you think he's just doing that to remain relevant. Yet, we have so many people who have come out, for instance, with the Occupy IEBC protest that have said they have no confidence in the current IEBC as it is constituted.
First and foremost, I do not know of any other leader who is able to mobilize people apart from Mr. Raila.
And maybe because he has a point.
Of course, I can tell you why. You see, now you are a leader of the opposition. You are not in parliament. And therefore, you would want a process which is being handled outside parliament. And therefore, if you want to remain relevant in 2016 to become a key political player, you need to come up with a strategy that is going to ensure you are hitting the headlines.
So in short, are you saying that the protests for him are not genuine? It's just a
by the way, relevant? Well, by the way, Mr. Raila Odinga is not going to say that. He can't say that. But behind the curtain, behind the facade, that is most likely the reality. No wonder I'm proposing. No wonder I'm proposing. If we genuinely want to make our country better, we need to lift some veils. We need to really look what inspires politicians, what makes politicians to strategize behind what you see in the newspapers. Because there is another whole school of operations of politicians behind that which you see, and you see our actions.
On what is reported. Honorable Kaluma, let me give you a chance to respond.
Mike, this is the thinking that divides our country. You know, Mike, I don't like Uhuru Kenyatta as a person, but I have to respect him because he's the president. I can tell you, even next elections I'll not vote for him because I don't like him as a person and I don't believe he's a good leader. But I must respect him as a president. I mean, Kangata cannot say Raila Odinga is seeking relevance and at the same time say Raila Odinga is the only person who can attract, crowds. What relevance would Raila Odinga be searching? Can I say point of
correction?
What we are dealing with, Mike,
one point
is to me very simple.
What's the correction point so that we
can... The correction point is this one. My thesis has nothing to do with Raila Odinga per se. Even if Raila Odinga is not there, I'm imagining any rational opposition leader who is not in public office, who wants to remain relevant, would probably do the same.
Mike, let me add it. Mike, the problem of Kangata is the problem of many Kenyans. We've not understood our law and the systems. Kangata imagines he's in government and I'm not in government. Very wrongly. All Kenyans are in government. We have then created political parties as institutions. So the thinking that Raila has to be in parliament to be a leader, remember those political parties are being funded by the taxpayer and is the opposition leader. He's in office and a constitutional one. Let us not look at things, in that restricted manner. What we need is a bit of civic, literacy, as I've said before. Mike, the problem with negative ethnicity and the problem of hate and division in our country is not about lack of laws. If you look at the Constitution from the very first chapter to the end, the one silver lining you'll find is equity, inclusivity, ethnic proportions in public appointments, the face of Kenya in constituting public officers, devolution to ensure equity in distribution of resources. The problem we have in Kenya is a problem of failure to implement the laws we already have. And that is where we should go to. And that is why I'm saying, if you just needed law, we would be very far. How do we enforce, strict application of the law? And that is why we are blaming institutions that should be doing so. We have blamed NCIC, rightly so, because their first duty is to ensure that, public service reflects the face of Kenya. So the people of Kenya do not have a situation where some people think their role is merely to pay taxes and it ends there like the people of Homa Bay, but also, share equitably in those resources. The people of Kenya don't think that public offices, and Gangata will tell you, currently, we are in a very sorry situation, Mike, where any serious public service appointment coming, in fact, we make jokes on the corridors. Is it from Central Kenya or Nandi? Who do you have this time? Those are the jokes we don't have. Let us follow the Constitution. Let us stop behaving as if we have, suspended this good constitutional instrument we gave to ourselves. And then we'll be a united people.
All right, Javas, in terms of looking at where we are today, what do you think is the problem that bedevils us as a country? From the days of Moi, he's very famous for talking about ukabila, left, right, and center. And we thought that maybe with the exit of certain leaders, then maybe there would be a chance that this would stop. Evidently, it hasn't.
Well, you see, we are not perfectly a unique nation. If it's a question of ethnic groups, all across East Africa, we have got tribes in those countries. Whether you go to South Africa, Tanzania, whether you go to the northern part, West Africa, you will find them. Whether you go to other even progressive democracies. But how come we use ours negatively to the extent that we want to see every day how different we are instead of how common we are due to these tribes? And you see, from a sociological and even anthropological perspective, one would want to appreciate that the issues of tribes, these are supposed to be instruments, social instruments, for people to engage communally, to trade, etc., not to see how different they are. And you see, most of the time, even if you look at the history of our nation's founding, then you may want to bring yourself to the fact that, one, the elitist politicians noted this and said if they exploit this, it will be to their greater advantage. And that has been done successfully. To divide the people, to see how different they are, to say, people of this house, and that's the language they use at rallies. But you see, we belong to one house called Kenya. And that's the kind of house that all of us must be proud of. The other thing is this. I think seeing about 53 years since our nation's founding, we haven't done the better for ourselves. We've tried. We can't beat ourselves too much and pinch ourselves. We've tried. But the point is that we can do better because we realize these things in our time. And the fact that we take note of these things and the fact that we are ridiculed also across the borders, whether you go to Tanzania or Uganda, because of how we use our tribalism to see how we can hack each other as brothers, then we must learn from it. And it's because of this international ridiculing that is even making us lose out on some things. For example, when you look at the issues of SGR, etc. and whatnot. Look at it this way, that, for example, when Barack Obama won the presidency in 2008, if you look at his or study his acceptance speech, he speaks to all people, including Republicans, and seeks their help, and he tells them, I will be your president too. Why can't we find it here that whether you're a governor in a cosmopolitan county or you're president, regardless of your ethnic extraction, that you are now a leader of all the people. If we bring ourselves to that point, then we'll have a very progressive nation.
Okay. Irungu Kangata, we're now winding up because of time. Solutions. Let's talk solutions. What do we need to do? You're a member of parliament. You're a leader by right of the fact that you represent the people of Kiharu. What are you doing to unite the people of Kiharu and remind them that they're not just segmented to Kiharu constituency, but they are Kenyans?
One, provide incentives for politicians to do good instead of doing bad. Presently, the incentives which are there are for politicians to do bad. Because when you do bad, you become a hero in your community. So therefore, provide legal incentives and other than legal incentives for politicians to be good people. And probably one of the areas probably we need to address maybe would be the issue of media. I don't know whether we can provide that in law, or you can self-regulate yourself so that you give more prominence to politicians when they do good things. For instance, there are so many MPs who are bringing positive bills which are not being highlighted. Politicians who are doing a very good job in parliament, but they're not being highlighted. But this tendency of where you just highlight people who tend to do bad things.
I think that they are mentioned. It's just that with good news, maybe people don't notice it, but they are there. When you bring up bills in parliament, we definitely put it in the papers, we talk about it, and we also go ahead and define what the bill is supposed to, help benefit the Kenyan. But to blame the media, I think is very unfair.
Because he's a good leader.
Here we are giving giving you a platform to tell us what we need to do, and you're still blaming us. But anyway.
Well, to me, that's part of the problem. To a small, and by the way, I can tell you for free, to some extent, I understand some of the better and long established media houses. But I wish you can listen to what we call the vernacular media platforms. And you'll be astonished to the level of ethnicity which is being spewed using those forums. And it appears there's no recourse. Number two, we also need probably to come up with ways of looking at the Constitution. We ask ourselves, has the Constitution come up with mechanisms which are sufficient enough to address the issue of tribalism? To me, no, it has not. There are several areas probably a good expert in constitutional making can tax his mind on.
Okay.
And ensure
I want to hear solutions also from Honorable Peter Kaluma as we wind up.
Yeah, just to one, let us, live by the laws we have already made. Let us be a true rule of law country. The way to do so is when the law says serve the face of Kenya in public service, don't make some Kenyans feel they merely pay taxes. Integrate them to make a cohesive nation. Two, those who are in leadership must take very deliberate, actions to ensure that at whatever unit or level of leadership they are, they speak and act in a manner that integrates all. Mike, I lead a cosmopolitan, constituency. And I can tell you, I always boast I'm one MP who is like the president of Kenya. I have Somalis who are in Homa Bay in the 1950s, whose children know not the Somali language but the Luo language. And I can tell you, when I entered as the member of parliament this time, the Somalis and these other, non-indigenous communities were telling me that something like bursary they have never gotten. You seek bursary, you are told to go to Mandera, Wajir, which those children do not know at all. So deliberately, what I've done is to ensure when you are starting, you start with those people. What remains after that is for the indigenous. But really, get away in which resources. You cannot have a situation, Mike, where you have a budget, for instance, of 2.3 trillion. And then when a police officer is graced in dealing with protesters in Homa Bay, they have to be airlifted. It tells you something about the situation in which the citizens of the country in Homa Bay are. So let us, have these resources spread through.
All right. I want to wind up with Jabez Bigambo and solutions.
You cannot legislate wisdom. You cannot legislate morality. And we cannot afford to have everything in the Constitution or even in pieces of legislation. Some things are supposed to now to be enforced by all this. They don't have to be seen. Just like airbags in a car. You don't have to see them, but they're there. So we need to have all these things. Now, in just not too distant a past, the Malagasy people in Madagascar elected a DJ for president. How far did they go? So if we find ourselves electing leaders merely because of their theatrics, then it's their theatrics that we will get in return. And in the end, we will not serve ourselves dutifully as a country. We live in a state of asymptotic sadness today as a country as we move toward the next election, just because of the state of leadership. If we fix our leadership, we'll fix our future.
All right, and I guess that now puts the responsibility on you, the Kenyan, to ensure that as we go to 2017, we're not electing leaders like Irungu Kang'ata says. The more vile they are, the more they become heroic. So the responsibility is on us as the electorate. Thank you very much, Honorable Peter Kaluma, Member of Parliament for Homa Bay Town, Irungu Kang'ata, Member of Parliament for Kiharu, and Javas Bigambo, who is a governance consultant. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That's the state of the nation. We're going to wind up this section of the program right about there.